I'm sure it doesn't come as a surprise to you that the financial crisis has led to a real tsunami of new regulation or proposals of new regulations in Switzerland as well. It's not least because of Madoff and Lehman that the Swiss regulator, the Swiss supervisor and the Swiss government has taken the opportunity to review and look at the whole Swiss financial market regulation and to consider whether and to what extent that regulation needs to be improved. The government has proposed a couple of new pieces of legislations. There are two main pieces which were just proposed a couple of weeks or months ago, which I would like to talk about in slightly more detail. One concerns is the Financial Institution Act. The Financial Institution Act is a new act proposed by the government which actually summarizes or contains all the provisions on supervision, on prudential supervision of financial intermediaries in Switzerland. The new thing about that legislation and about supervision in Switzerland is, on the one hand, that the government proposes to introduce a kind of cascade of licenses, starting with the banking license, which will allow the banks to perform all financial intermediary activities in Switzerland, and down the cascade are the securities dealer, which will be renamed in German as Wertpapierhäuser, and those securities dealer are allowed to do security intermediation, and obviously in contrast to what the banks do, they are not allowed to run accounts and to grant credits and this kind of things. The other new tendency or proposal is the fact that asset managers will be subject to prudential supervision in Switzerland if the proposal of the government passes Parliament. So far, you may know that asset managers in Switzerland are not regulated, so everybody can actually start its own business as asset manager, start providing asset management services without having to get a license from FINMA, from the regulator, nor does he have to follow any specific rules of conduct in Switzerland. That is going to change, and that's quite dramatic a change for Switzerland. You may know that Switzerland has between 3,000 and 4,000 independent asset managers. All those asset managers are not supervised at the moment. There are micro corporations or even individuals providing asset management services, and all those individuals will have or will become subject to organizational rules which will require quite a bit of staff in order to comply with all the code of conduct rules which will be implemented, and it will not be possible, I guess, for smaller asset manager to stay in business. So I'm perfectly convinced that if the proposal passes Parliament, we'll see a dramatic change in the Swiss market. We'll see many asset managers stopping doing business or actually merge with other asset managers or be integrated into banks and other financial institutions. The second piece of legislation I wanted to talk to you about is the so-called Financial Services Act. The Financial Services Act will contain rules of conduct for all financial intermediaries providing financial services to clients in Switzerland, whether they do it from abroad or directly with a permanent establishment in Switzerland. The Act will apply apply, or the conduct rules will apply to investment advisors as well. Investment advisors will not be subject to prudential supervision under the Financial Institution Act, but nonetheless they will have to follow the Code of Conduct rules and obligations imposed in the Financial Services Act. Now, what are these Financial Services Act rules, and how will they affect the structured product industry, in particular the distribution of structured products to retail investors in Switzerland? The good news is that structured products will not be subject to product supervision in Switzerland. So opposed to what happens in other jurisdictions, mainly in the EU, it will not be required for a producer, for an issuer of structured products, to have these structured products pre-approved by the Swiss regulator, or to follow specific rules such as product bans or the prohibition to sell complex products to retail investors. That are all provisions which will not which have not been proposed and which are unlikely to be introduced in Switzerland. What will change for the issuer of structured products is on the documentation and transparency side. You may know that in Switzerland so far structured products have been able to be offered to retail investors based on a simplified prospectus only, a kind of a summary prospectus containing all the main characteristics of a structured product, but not being as comprehensive as a full prospectus, which you will know from other jurisdictions, like from the EU jurisdictions. Under the new Act, a issuer will be obliged to produce and to publish a full prospectus. A full prospectus is needed whenever a structured product is publicly offered in Switzerland. The definition of publicly offering is pretty similar to what the definition under the Prospectus Directive in Europe looks like. So if you're distributing or offering to institutional investors only, that's not a public offering. If you're distributing to less than 150 private clients, then that is not a public offering in Switzerland, and you will not need to produce a full prospectus. Now, you're not only obliged to produce a full prospectus, but this full prospectus needs to be approved by an authority. It's unclear yet whether that authority is going to be FINMA, or whether it's more likely that that authority is going to be SIX exchange regulation or a similar organization. You will have, as an issuer, to produce that prospectus, that full prospectus, and submit it to the relevant authority for pre-approval prior actually to launch. Besides having to produce this full prospectus, you will be required as an issuer to produce a key information document. The key information document will be required for all products which are sold or offered to private clients, irrespective of whether in the context of a public offering or by public placement only. The content of the key information document has not been defined in great detail in the proposed draft regulation. It will be contained, obviously, in ordinances or technical standards issued either by the government or by the supervisory authority, FINMA. What the proposal shows is that the government expects the key information document to contain information on who the issuer of the product is, on what the main characteristics and risks of the structured product are, and more important, it is required that the issuer discloses all the fees and costs in connection with the structured product. Now, as far as costs are concerned, it's likely that the ordinance and the technical standards issued by FINMA will be very similar to what we've seen in Europe for MiFID II and PRIPS, i.e. most likely the issuers will be required to disclose a total cost figure, total cost containing distribution fees, containing structuring fees and management fees, and it will most likely be required at the request of any investor to segregate the total fees and show all these three categories of fees to investors. That key information document is not to be confused with the simplified prospectus. It's another document very similar to the kit which will be required under PRIPS. Now, that is it as far as obligations of the issuer of a structured product are concerned. All other obligations and duties and contact rules are imposed upon the point of sale, i.e. upon the distributor of a structured product and not the issuer of a structured product. Of main interest is the fact that, similar to the EU, the distributor, the point of sale, will have to conduct a appropriateness and suitability check, very similar to what is done in the EU. So for private clients, he will have to check whether and what the financial situation of a investor is, and what the knowledge and experience of the financial investor with structured products is. And depending on what the answers of the investors are, he's allowed to sell the product, or he has to warn the private client not to invest in that specific product. One final word perhaps on inducements, a very hot topic both in Europe as well as in Switzerland. By contrast to what is going to happen under MiFID II, in Switzerland, both for asset managers and investment advisors, it will remain possible and allowed to accept inducements, and the advisor or manager will not be obliged to pass on the inducements to the investors, as long as he has notified the investors of the amount of inducement that he receives, and has received an acknowledgement of the investor that the advisor and manager may keep the inducements. So different to what happens or what is going to happen in the EU, we will continue to see business models where the investment advisor or asset manager will actually be paid out of inducements received from product producers, both structured products and investment funds, rather than the typical EU model to come, namely that all the payments will have to come from the investor itself. If investor or asset manager, however, accepts inducements from third parties and doesn't pass them on to the investor, will not be allowed to describe himself as an independent asset manager or as an independent investment advisor. These terms is limited and can be used only for investment advisors and managers who do not retain any inducements. 2 words on when this law are expected to come into force. I have mentioned that we have only proposals from the government yet. A consultation period is running until the end of October or mid-October actually. Then it is expected that the government will prepare the messages and the drafts for Parliament. Parliament discussion is expected, or debate is expected for 2015, late 2015 and early 2016, and the government still hopes to pass Parliament, for the laws to pass Parliament in